It was 2:14 in the morning when the grainy, poorly lit cell phone photo hit a rather obscure, highly elitist audiophile message board. The framing was terrible. The lighting was that sickly, flickering fluorescent yellow you only ever find in the back aisles of local thrift stores. Sitting there, directly on the scuffed linoleum floor next to a pile of discarded VHS tapes and a broken toaster, was a dusty cardboard box. Inside that box was a bizarre, almost comical pair of headphones. They were massive, bulbous. The ear cups looked like they had been carved out of wooden mixing bowls. The cable was dangerously frayed near the connector, and slapped right on the side of that beautiful aged wood was a neon green paper sticker screaming a price: $19.99. The narrator of the original post simply asked, "Yet are these worth picking up for 20 bucks?" There was a pause, a digital holding of breath. And then, the forum completely crashed. The server buckled under the sudden, frantic influx of private messages, desperate replies, and sheer collective panic from hundreds of audio purists who recognized exactly what was sitting on that thrift store floor. The person who took that photo hadn't just found some weird vintage toy from a bygone era. They had stumbled upon a genuine artifact. A piece of engineering so rare, so obsessively overbuilt, and so legendary that its current market value routinely flirts with the $8,000 mark. This throws us straight into a mystery that goes far beyond a lucky garage sale find. We are going to investigate exactly why certain technological relics from past decades refuse to die. Why they don't just survive the relentless march of the digital age, but actively laugh right in its face. We are cracking open the archives of a very specific, very brief era of pure, unadulterated mechanical excess. A time when a rogue class of engineers flat out ignored practicality. They ignored the accountants. They ignored the marketing departments, and occasionally, they even ignored the laws of common sense to build absolute monuments to sound. These are the machines that broke the rules. And our first file takes us back to a time when pushing the boundaries literally meant playing with fire. The year is 1985. The audio industry is starting to get comfortable. The wild experimentation of the previous decade is settling down, and manufacturers are moving towards safe, efficient, predictable speakers that could easily be driven by the average amplifier sitting in a suburban living room. And then a company called Apogee went in the exact opposite direction. They released a speaker called the Cintilla, and it looked less like a piece of audio equipment and more like an imposing monolithic slab of modern art. It was a massive, flat panel that completely eliminated traditional speaker cones. There were no paper woofers pushing air. Instead, the Cintilla relied entirely on pure aluminum ribbons, suspended and floating delicately within incredibly powerful magnetic fields. When an electrical signal passed through them, the entire ribbon vibrated, producing a sound that reviewers at the time described as almost terrifyingly lifelike. It was a window directly into the recording studio. But perfection always comes with a price, and the Cintilla had a tragic, brutal flaw. To achieve that ethereal sound, the engineers designed a crossover network that caused the speaker's electrical impedance to plummet to 1 ohm. If you aren't familiar with electrical engineering, an impedance of 1 ohm isn't really a speaker anymore. To an amplifier, a 1 ohm load looks almost exactly like a dead short circuit. It is the electrical equivalent of taking a thick copper wire and jamming it directly across the positive and negative terminals of your amplifier. The Cintilla demanded so much raw, instantaneous current that it earned a dark, whispered nickname in the industry: the Amp Killer. People would bring these beautiful monoliths home, hook them up to highly expensive, highly regarded amplifiers, and within minutes of turning up the volume, the amplifiers would literally start to smoke. Transistors would violently pop. Heat sinks would scorch. The Cintilla was a speaker that demanded a level of power that practically did not exist in the consumer market at the time. It was an unsustainable level of perfectionism that eventually contributed to the corporate decline of Apogee. They built a product too good, too demanding for the world it lived in. Yet today, the Cintilla is the center of an impossible restoration cult. Because that sound was so intoxicating, There is now a micro-industry of brave, highly specialized technicians who spend thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours cutting new aluminum ribbons entirely by hand. They are keeping a machine alive that not even the original factory could sustain, simply because the world has never produced anything quite like it since. If the Apogee Cintilla was a delicate, dangerous instrument of finesse, our next machine is the exact opposite. We are moving from the surgical to the industrial. Welcome to the climax of the infamous receiver wars of the 1970s. In 1978, Pioneer unleashed the SX-1980. Calling this thing a radio receiver is like calling a great white shark a fish. It is technically true, but it wildly misses the point. This was a 35-kilogram Leviathan. That is nearly 80 pounds of brushed aluminum, solid glass, heavy copper, and thick walnut veneer. You didn't just place the SX-1980 on a shelf. You had to reinforce the furniture before you set it down. Moving it was a genuine physical hazard. It was built with massive, custom-wound toroidal transformers that looked like they were ripped out of a municipal power substation. It felt less like home audio equipment and more like industrial-grade machinery or the door to a bank vault. But why? Why on earth did this exist? During the late 70s, the major audio brands were locked in a vicious, ego-driven arms race to produce the highest wattage possible. It was the muscle car era of audio. The SX-1980 was Pioneer's nuclear option, delivering a staggering, completely unnecessary 270 watts per channel into a home living room. The skepticism at the time was entirely justified. Nobody needed that much power to listen to a Fleetwood Mac record. It was overkill of the highest order. But that overkill is exactly why it survived. The SX-1980 was built with a level of armored durability that simply cannot be replicated today without costing tens of thousands of dollars. The tactile sensation of grabbing its solid machined aluminum volume knob and turning it feels like engaging the throttle on a commercial jet. It is a triumph of analog excess, heavily coveted today not just for how it sounds, but as a physical artifact of a time when companies were willing to bankrupt themselves just to say they built the biggest, heaviest, most indestructible machine on the planet. As we move into 1979, the industry was obsessed with a new kind of convenience. Turntables were getting lighter, slimmer, and utilizing direct drive motors to spin the platter with push-button ease. The future was sleek. The future was lightweight. The engineers at a boutique Japanese firm called Seiki looked at that lightweight future and completely rejected it. They decided to solve the problem of playing vinyl records using brute force physics. This brings us to the Seiki RX-5000. To understand the madness of this machine, you have to understand that playing a vinyl record is essentially a microscopic seismic event. You are dragging a tiny diamond through a jagged plastic trench, trying to amplify microscopic vibrations into massive sound. The enemy of that process is any other vibration in the room. Footsteps, the rumble of traffic outside, even the hum of the turntable's own motor. Most companies tried to solve this with soft rubber feet or bouncy springs. Seiki solved it with mass. The RX-5000 featured a platter machined from solid gunmetal that weighed 16 kilograms all by itself. Just the part that spins weighed more than most complete turntables. But the true stroke of uncompromising genius was how they spun it. They completely removed the motor from the turntable chassis. They placed a heavy, isolated motor unit on the table next to the platter and connected the two using an aramid string, a material closely related to Kevlar. It was a machine that flat out refused to trust its own environment. By separating the motor and using immense, undeniable mass, the RX-5000 essentially created its own gravitational ecosystem. It isolated the delicate stylus from the microscopic vibrations of the Earth itself. It wasn't convenient. It took up a massive amount of space. You had to manually tie a Kevlar knot to get it to work. But it achieved a level of rotational stability and silence that digital audio was supposed to make obsolete. Today, seeing an RX-5000 in the wild is like finding a perfectly preserved mechanical watch in an era of smartwatches. It is a testament to the idea that sometimes, the hardest, heaviest way to do something is the only right way. But what happens when that philosophy of no compromises is applied to the very electricity pulsing through your walls? In 1980, the world was aggressively pushing toward cooler, smaller, and increasingly digital-friendly electronics. Efficiency was the new buzzword. Then Krell Industries dropped the KSA-100 amplifier. If the Pioneer was a muscle car, the Krell KSA-100 was a thermal reactor. This was an amplifier that operated entirely in pure Class A. Now, without getting bogged down in electrical diagrams, the easiest way to understand Class A amplification is with a car analogy. Imagine you have a high-performance sports car and you start the engine. But instead of letting it idle normally, you put it in neutral and completely floor the gas pedal, redlining the engine constantly, even while you are just sitting in the driveway. That is what a Class A amplifier does with electricity. It runs its output transistors at absolute maximum capacity, 100% of the time, regardless of whether music is playing quietly, loudly, or not at all. The result was a machine that generated a staggering, almost alarming amount of heat. It could literally warm a small room in the winter. It was flanked by brutalist, razor-sharp heat sinks that looked like they belonged on the exterior of a nuclear submarine. It was grossly, unapologetically inefficient. It was an absolute nightmare for your monthly electric bill, and leaving it on by accident was a legitimate fire hazard. So why build it? Because by keeping those transistors constantly primed at maximum capacity, the KSA-100 eliminated a specific type of electrical distortion completely. It exerted a terrifying, absolute, iron-fisted control over any speaker it touched, even the notorious amp-killing Apogee Cintilla we talked about earlier. The Krell didn't care what you plugged into it. It simply forced the speaker to submit to its will. It was an indoor power plant dedicated solely to the preservation of the audio signal, sacrificing every ounce of modern convenience for pure, violent performance, which finally brings us full circle. We return to 1989. We return to the object that opened our story. The world is utterly obsessed with the Sony Walkman. Audio has become portable, disposable, and wrapped in cheap, brightly colored plastic. People are listening to cassette tapes on the subway using headphones that weigh less than a pair of sunglasses and cost about as much as a sandwich. In jarring, almost comedic contrast to their own massive commercial success with cheap portable audio, a rogue team of senior engineers deep within Sony decided they were going to build the king of headphones. They were given a blank check and told to ignore the market entirely. This is exactly where that bizarre, bulbous pair of wooden headphones, with the frayed cable and the $19.99 neon green thrift store price tag, finally reveals its true identity. This is the Sony MDR-R10. And it is the biological unicorn of the audio world. The engineers didn't just want to make a good headphone. They wanted to create an acoustic masterpiece. They decided that standard plastics and metals were unacceptable for the ear cups. Instead, they scoured Japan and settled on the wood of the Zelkova tree. But not just any Zelkova tree. They required trees that were at least 200 years old, utilizing only the heartwood, which was then painstakingly carved into those strange, bulbous 3D shapes to perfectly control the resonance of the sound waves inside the cup. But the wood wasn't even the craziest part. The real madness was the speaker driver itself. They rejected paper. They rejected mylar. They rejected titanium. Instead, Sony engineers turned to biology. They utilized a newly discovered material called biocellulose. To make the diaphragms for the MDR-R10, Sony literally employed colonies of Acetobacter bacteria in a laboratory. They fed the bacteria a specific sugary broth, and as the bacteria digested it, they naturally spun microscopic fibers of pure cellulose. It took days for the bacteria to grow a layer thick enough, which was then harvested, dehydrated, and pressed into a speaker cone that was thinner than a human hair but incredibly rigid. They grew their headphones in a petri dish. When the Sony MDR-R10 launched in 1989, it carried an absolutely absurd price tag of $3,000. Adjusted for inflation, that is a staggering amount of money for a pair of wired headphones. Unsurprisingly, It was a resounding, catastrophic commercial failure. If it was completely disconnected from what the market wanted or could afford. Nobody in 1989 understood why they should pay $3 for wooden headphones grown by bacteria when they could buy a yellow sports Walkman for 40 bucks. But the engineers were right. The sound produced by that 200-year-old wood and those biological drivers was so spacious, so incredibly natural and resolving, that nothing else sounded quite like it. And because it was a commercial failure, very few were ever made. It became a myth, a ghost. And it is exactly because of this arrogant, uncompromising, wildly expensive engineering that the MDR-R10 is considered today to be the ultimate holy grail of personal audio. Finding a working pair is nearly impossible. Finding one sitting on the linoleum floor of a thrift store for $20 is the equivalent of finding a winning lottery ticket buried in the trash. When you look at these 5 machines, the speaker that set amps on fire, the receiver that weighed as much as a bank vault, the turntable that fought gravity, the amplifier that heated the room, and the headphones grown by bacteria, you realize they share a single unifying philosophy. They aren't just consumer electronics. They are physical, heavy, beautifully flawed manifestations of a deeply human, incredibly stubborn pursuit of perfection. They remind us of a very specific window in time when things were built to be the absolute best they could possibly be, rather than just being good enough for the next financial quarter. They are monuments to a time when engineers were allowed to dream dangerously. We live in a world now where everything is designed to be replaced. Your phone, your laptop, your wireless earbuds, they all have an expiration date built into their very chemistry. They will eventually end up in a drawer and then in a landfill, and nobody will ever spend thousands of dollars trying to restore them 40 years from now. But these mechanical giants, they endure. They demand to be fixed. They demand to be listened to. So I will leave you with one final thought, almost as a shared secret between us. The next time you are walking past a neighborhood garage sale, or you find yourself wandering down the dusty, fluorescent-lit back aisles of a local thrift store, look a little closer at the junk on the floor. Pay attention to the heavy, the weird, and the wooden. Because somewhere out there, buried right under a pile of discarded, yellowing plastic, an unrecognized, over-engineered masterpiece from a forgotten era might just be sitting there, patiently waiting for a $20 price tag. If you want to keep exploring the hidden histories of the things we leave behind, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next archive.